Okay, so the fourth and final installment of this series. It's time to weather and window up this bad boy. So, windows, we went over it in episode 2. And if you don't want to watch that, I get it. It's 20-something minutes. And you're here for windows? Well, all you need to do is just cut out some windows in whatever foam board or XPS foam or balsa wood material you're using and get some plastic canvas. I think this is also called granny grading. And people use it for sewing, I guess. And get some of that. It cuts really easy with an X-Acto knife. Tilted sideways, so you're getting like kind of diamond shapes instead of squares, unless you're going for a very industrial prison type look. I'm not on this one. And just cut pieces out of that. Meet us in part 2. The rest of us, we're going to be applying a gratuitous amount of moss. Let's get started. We're going to start by slanging some pigments. What does that mean exactly? Well, I'll tell you after this quick recap. So last episode I did touch on, if your plaster was too dark after applying the washes, you can just hit it with a dry brush of white paint. For this, I'd actually use model paint because it can be more transparent than the thick, coarse pigments in the craft paint. So when it dries, it'll become a little bit darker. I'm just using Vallejo white because I'm a Vallejo fanboy. Alright, moving on to the pigments. What are pigments? Well, you might know, and if you don't, that's cool too. So, as defined by Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it is a noun and a substance used for coloring or painting, especially a dry powder that, when mixed with oil, water, or another medium, constitutes a paint or ink. So, a number of miniature companies make pigments in a whole range of colors. I'm testing out this Green Stuff World stuff, but, you can get it from a number of different places. Your local art shop might be a little more expensive. Vallejo makes a range, Cromlech, AK Interactive, MIG too. Yeah, a ton of stuff. Secret Weapon, maybe? Does Secret Weapon do it? I don't know. But anyways, all you need to do, and this is a very inelegant way of applying it, but it gets the job done, and I'm pretty much phoning in the rest of the project. And all you do is just take a brush and just slap that pigment on there. And what I'm doing is I'm applying 3 different pigments: deep or dark brown earth, medium earth, and wild moss. So the dark brown earth is going to go on the very bottom of the model in order to represent kind of wet mud. Then the middle earth by Green Stuff World, which is a mid-brown, is going to be dried mud, and it's going to be placed a little atop the dark mud, or the dark earth. And then, obviously, wild moss is going all over the place. Now, there are official pigment binder solutions that are sold, but I'm just fixing these in place with scenic glue, so Mod Podge, 1 part to 3 parts water with some flow aid. Alternatively, that's kind of like the hammer option. It's really not necessary. You can just spray some alcohol on it, some isopropyl rubbing alcohol, and you'll be good to go. That'll set in place, and then when you dull coat the model or, apply your varnish protective coat, it'll get sealed in there. So I just keep working the pigments around the building. And pigments are generally reasonably priced. They're about as expensive as a Citadel or Vallejo or Scale 75 paint. And just sealing it in place here. You don't need to spray a lot of liquid on these things to bind them. Just get them a little wet and they'll be good to go. Now, after the really phoned in weathering process, I'm going to do some vines. So obviously it's going to be hard to paint hemp cord, so I'm just taking some artist's paint, some burnt umber, adding some craft paint red into a bit of water, stirring that up, darkening it down with a little bit of burnt umber ink, which is completely not necessary, and balling up the hemp cord and just dunking it in that paint and ink solution, and I just dab it off and then hang it out to dry, and that colors the vines. Yep. Then Once all the pieces are dry and colored or whatever, I kind of start dry twisting them together. Dry twisting meaning there's no like glue on them or whatever. So I twist them together into sort of a vine shape. And then I take some tacky spray glue. This is just Alina's tacky spray glue. Spray that down and dump it in a tub of flock. The flock I'm using is Green Grass by Woodland Scenics. It's a fine foam flock. So it's super lightweight, super fine, and it really sticks on there once you hit it with something like tacky glue. I realize that looks lame, so I give another layer of tacky glue and then dunked it in some Woodland Scenics coarse turf, medium green. And that gave it more body and looked more acceptable. But yeah, you can do a lot to make vines better. They also make realistic leaves, miniature leaves that you can use. Noch does it, Scenic Express does it, and there's a picture of the vine. I would have shown you how I added it with super glue and activator, but I lost the footage. Okay, moving on to windows. So, you take out all of your cut window pieces that rest inside the windows, and I spray prime them black. And after they're primed and dried, I hit them with a dark metallic craft paint. This is called Sequin Black, and it's pretty much black paint with little mica flecks, so it looks barely metallic. And this is unnecessary. You could totally just keep them black. Now this entire process, in fact, turned out to be a little bit futile because apparently primer does not stick very well. At least this Rust-Oleum primer does not stick very well to the plastic canvas. What I'm doing right now is I'm just bringing the wood on the window trim up to the same color as the wood on the house. So I'm just applying a mid-brown, trying to dry it out and failing with the hairdryer, and they just start spraying all over the place. But they get dry, and then hitting it with a browny gray for a layer, and then highlighting with the barnwood color, which is more of a gray than a brown. And unfortunately, as I was saying, a lot of this paint ends up coming out, so I have to repaint it a little bit once the windows are inside, because I have to push them in with my fingers, and it just ruins the whole darn thing. But maybe you'll have more luck with this than I did. Alright, now in order to put a backing on the windows, because we're going to be applying water texture inside the windows to mimic glass, so something needs to hold the water texture in place while it dries. So we're just going to be taking any piece of plastic. As long as it's flat and transparent, you're good to go. I think this is from, I don't know, some random container I had in the house. And what I'm doing is I'm just cutting out a square, eyeballing the cuts that are exact same size or smaller than the window pieces. And I've just fixed them in place with super glue. And if you don't want any frosting, I don't care about frosting, spray them with activator. And in an assembly line fashion, I just keep cutting out plastic backings to the windows. Now, if you want them to fit snugly and easily, I'd make the little plastic sheets that go behind the granny grating or plastic canvas a little smaller than the plastic canvas, because the more you have to push them in, the more paint's going to come off. Maybe it was just the primer I'm using. I'm still not over it. Once the plastic backings are glued in place, it's just a simple matter of sticking those windows in there. Now, the water texture that we're going to be applying is resin-based, so when it hardens, it's going to act as a glue. So you don't need to glue these in here. The water texture itself will keep them in there firmly. And you see, as I push that sucker in there, a lot of the paint comes off. And I probably cut that too large. I probably should have cut some material off before trying to force it in there. And here's me reapplying paint. Yeah, that one really got the business. Okay, moving on. So to weather these windows a little bit, I'm taking Tamiya Weathering Master, which is kind of like a semi-wet pigment that comes with a sort of eyeshadow makeup applicator. And all you do is rub it into the pigment, and then you can rub it on whatever surface you want, and it gives like a rust effect, which I'm using right there, just to give the grading a little bit of rust. So, yeah, that's Tamiya Weathering Master. Okay, then we come in with the Vallejo water texture, and I really struggle opening this up. If you can see the top of the camera, I just cannot get this thing open. I eventually do, however. Perseverance, something to be said for it. And then all I do is take an old brush that I no longer use for miniature painting. I just dunk it into the Vallejo water texture and let it seep off the brush into all the little spaces in the plastic canvas. And they fill up with the water texture and essentially create little ponds that become the glass window panes in this old world window. I'm trying to avoid getting it on the top of the plastic canvas, i.e. the side that faces out, just so there isn't any resin on the metal grating as you look at it. But if you do get it on there, it's not the end of the world. You can just wipe off the top of it with a finger or a paper towel. And I do one side at a time, giving it about 30 minutes to dry before moving it or rotating the house, just so the water texture doesn't seep out of the window. It doesn't take very long to dry. For a total cure, it takes hours and hours, but it'll stay in place if you give it 30 minutes. And then I'm really phoning in these lanterns that I made in episode 2, and I'm just hitting them with an Army Painter Weapon Bronze, just to give them a bronze color. I'm really not even priming them. I'm just hoping they stay bronze after I hit them with a clear coat varnish. And yeah, that's about all the processes and procedures that I used for this build. And there are ways to weather this too, if you want to give it a verdigris or patina. I know Citadel makes an official technical paint for that. I forget what it's called. And finally, when everything's done, I take some Krylon Color Clear, flat crystal clear, which is kind of like a matte protective layer. Is this a varnish? I don't know, I'd have to look at the can. I hope so, because I'm treating it as one. And I just spray that sucker down. I'm only doing one coat on this. And that is how you make an N, or one of the infinitesimal ways to make N's. You guys can do whatever you want, but I hope this was so helpful, or at least marginally helpful. Thank you so much for watching. See this oak tree right here? That's coming up next video. It's a wire tree, and I like it very much. Anyways, if this was helpful, like, share, and subscribe if you want to. Any questions, comments, put them down below. And let me know if I can do anything to help. Have a good one.